I'm sure you're aware of the, we'll just call it an ordinance that's been passed in the state of Florida, which basically wants to pretend that we don't actually have a homeless crisis. We are just going to push people out, which is what Governor DeSantis decided to do. And the importance of these, left populist movements is to recognize not just that housing is supposed to be a right, but that if you think you can just sweep the bad parts of capitalism under the rug forever, it's never going to last, because these things are just going to bust at the seams at some point. And you're seeing it now. And this is why there is such fervor for something other than the two-party duopoly we're stuck in right now. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, name your crisis, homelessness, which is at an all-time high. Renters are, 50% of renters are paying, to the teeth, just struggling to keep a roof over their heads. 87 million people who either don't have health care at all or have incomplete coverage. It's one crisis after another, while our brilliant leaders in Congress are spending half of our resources on the endless war machine, including this latest $17 billion in order to extend and expand genocide and expand the looming, critical war. It's not looming. It actually is in effect now. There is a Middle East war going on now. And it's like, how many times do we have to do this and just spend another trillion or two or three on another war that kills another million or more people? The Cost of War Project now out of Brown University estimates that the post 9/11 wars killed off some 4 to 6 million people. It's just staggering. What do they think they're doing? And they just double down. The more catastrophes they cause, they just double down for more of the same. So it's outrageous. People are hurting. And that is what makes this such a perfect storm of an election, to really challenge empire and oligarchy. They go hand in hand, and they go hand in hand with the assault on our democracy in every way imaginable. So, this is the time. And, this is a time to stand up and fight back like our lives depend on it, because they do.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that you use the phrase perfect storm, because Peter and I have been using that for a few years now to sort of prepare for what we're dealing with now down here electorally. And it needs to be a perfect storm. And there are certain things that you can do and certain things you can't do in terms of controlling it. Some of it just happens organically. But I agree. I think that it's very ripe right now for people, between labor stepping up, between what's going on in Palestine and all of these things, and Cop City, so many movements. And I keep saying that I feel like my mission is to connect those threads, because if all of those movements showed up for each other's things, that's how we win. And so I feel like that's why it's so important for us to recognize that despite what our issues are, the oppressor is the same person. I mean,
exactly.
People, multiple, but yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how you're hearing it, but I've been running for office for a while, starting back in 2002 when I first got tricked into running for governor in Massachusetts. And, at the time I was an activist, moving from one issue to the next, thinking, oh, surely this one is going to get traction and will reach critical mass. It started off with the single payer referendum that we had here in 1998 that, maybe before you guys were born, I don't know.
But what year?
1998.
Okay, I was born in 71. So I was married in 98. So I'm with you. I'm not. I appreciate the compliment though, but sorry.
So you've been through this rodeo too. I mean,
a while.
We nearly won this first single payer referendum in Massachusetts. We were beaten back because we were outspent 50-1 with all sorts of, fear campaigns. Oh, the lines will be too long, and oh, you won't be able to get covered. All the things that are actually already happening. And so we were beaten back, and then, and then we moved on to get the money out of politics, and we had a clean elections referendum, which also won. Well, this one, I should say, this not only won in the court of public opinion, this actually won by a 2-1 margin, by, like over 60%. We passed it as a referendum. And then our dear beloved progressive Democratic legislature here in Massachusetts repealed it on a voice vote. And, and then it was environmental health. And, it was one thing after another, just waiting for us to get to critical mass and actually win the day. Way back then, people wanted to do their own thing. They kind of wanted to be in their own movement. It was much harder to build, cross connections, between movements. And now that seems to be the order of the day. We were recently in New East Palestine, Ohio, deep red country, site of this, horrific, toxic mess, which is ongoing, and people are very sick. And they were like really ready to hear just the whole progressive agenda from immigrant rights, and, welcoming the people who are fleeing by the droves from the crises that we've created ourselves. People come as refugees here because we've, made their lives unlivable, because we've, exploited their economies and destabilized them and created wars and overthrown their democratic governments and, exacerbated their climate crisis, so it's one thing or another that people are fleeing and coming here to the source really of their destabilization. And then they're, demonized and mistreated and sent back to horrible oppressive conditions and all the rest. But they were actually willing to hear that, in East Palestine, Ohio, and were, ready to throw off both the Democrats and the Republicans and to vote third party. And it's just, it's like our lives have become so, imbued in crisis. Whatever dimension you look at, people are just struggling hour by hour to stay alive and keep a roof over your heads and get food on the table, that it's really become a very unifying uprising in whatever direction you look. And I find that, really helpful. And my computer is telling me that I need to plug it in. So
okay,
we're going to have a fit here. So
all right, you plug.
Let me talk for a minute while I just.
Okay, so I agree, and I've often said I support I wish we had no parties, to be honest with you. I don't like any of it. I think tribalism leads to things like nationalism, leads to all sorts to me, nothing really good comes from that mentality. And then you get people no longer acting with reason. So in other words, if somebody on the other team suggests something, even if it's reasonable, I'm not going to go with that because my people say this is no way to have anything work. This just doesn't work. And so I'm just averse to all that tribalism and all that nonsense anyway. And I would also suggest that it means different things to different people. So what one person says, oh, I'm conservative. I've had conversations with people where I agree with them on so many things. Mm-hmm. And I am like the most bleeding heart left, falling off the side almost person as I get older. So I find that when people can use reason, that's a big thing for me. I'm always like, reason is a big thing, that we can actually get things done, but we're not dealing with reason. We're dealing with fear and panic and desperate people, which are all purposefully being kept that way. And the one unifying thing, and Peter hates it when I say it, but the one unifying thing is capital. And that is, at the end of the day, the ultimate problem. And so all of these issues can trace back to capital, and whether it's East Palestine or anything. And I think that is why we all have the common oppressor.
Well,
Go ahead, Peter. And then
I was going to say, I don't think that the issue is whether or not capital exists. It will exist. It's just a question of whether or not there is a counterbalance. In this country today, there is no counterbalance. The management, ownership controls everything. Labor, in even its attempt to make a stand like they're trying to right now, is being regarded as, you have to stop it. You have to crush it, in spite of every sign that says we are in late stage capitalism. They're not even attempting to slow this down. In fact, they're trying to ram it down our throats, which is why Governor DeSantis does what he does, because they just don't care. They really think they're going to build their moats wide enough to stave off the people eventually rising up. And that is where we're heading right now. It's too obvious that that's where we're heading, because people can't afford to live. And if you can't afford to live, eventually you get desperate enough where it's not going to matter anymore. That's how people start doing the things that they're doing.